The studio lights were blazing, the cameras rolling, and the energy in the room was already tense when it happened. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice cutting through the noise with surgical precision. "Stephen, you can spin, you can dodge, but you cannot erase the truth that is staring this country in the face." Her words landed like a hammer, and for a split second, the panel froze. The audience watching at home could feel it. This was not another exchange of talking points. This was a strike aimed straight at the heart of Miller's carefully built image. Miller shifted in his seat, prepared to counter, but the timing was against him. Crockett's last blow had been too sharp, too undeniable. The moderator's eyes darted between them as if searching for the right moment to intervene, but no one dared to break the silence. It wasn't just a clash of opinions anymore. It was a moment that felt bigger than the stage, bigger than the debate itself. Crockett's words didn't just challenge Miller. They stripped him of the armor he had always relied on, leaving a stunned room and a speechless panel. And as the seconds of silence stretched longer than anyone expected, viewers realized they were witnessing something rare. The instant when power shifts, when the usual order collapses, and when even the most defiant voices are forced into stillness. The clash had been building long before the cameras turned on. Stephen Miller, one of the most combative figures in American politics, had crafted his reputation on sharp words and uncompromising positions. He was the strategist who prided himself on never being rattled, the voice who always seemed to dominate a room with relentless certainty. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, a rising force with a style entirely her own. She was fearless, unapologetic, and already notorious for confronting power head-on. Where Miller leaned on rehearsed lines and ideological fire, Crockett thrived on precision, timing, and a willingness to say what others would not. The panel itself had been set up as a showcase of contrasts. The network promoted it as a heavyweight exchange, an evening of debate that would put America's most polarizing voices in the same space. Around them sat other commentators, journalists, and analysts, each ready to weigh in. But it was clear from the start that the gravity of the night would rest on Miller and Crockett. The audience tuning in expected fireworks. They had seen Miller tear apart critics before, often leaving opponents stumbling. They had seen Crockett dismantle evasions with pointed facts and cutting lines. What they had not seen was these two forces colliding on live television, with the stakes elevated by a country already fractured and restless. It was not just another panel. It was a battle of reputations, of styles, of visions for what the nation was becoming. Every word was ammunition, every pause a potential opening. And as the exchanges intensified, the rest of the panel faded into the background, their voices drowned out by the gravity of a confrontation that felt inevitable. The air grew sharper with every back and forth. Viewers at home weren't just watching a debate. They were waiting for the moment when one of them would land the blow that could not be ignored. The debate turned from heated to volcanic in a matter of minutes. Crockett struck first with numbers, citing reports and investigations that Miller tried to brush aside. "You talk about protecting America, but every policy you pushed left families torn apart. You call it strategy, I call it cruelty." Miller shot back with his usual fire, dismissing her words as political theater. "What you call cruelty, the American people call security, and you would know that if you cared more about the nation than about your own spotlight." His voice rose, sharp and unyielding, but Crockett didn't flinch. She leaned in again, eyes locked on him. "Security isn't tearing children from their parents. Security isn't building fear while ignoring facts. What you've done is sell a brand of politics that feeds on division, and America is paying the price." The studio erupted in overlapping voices. Commentators jumped in, some siding with Miller, others echoing Crockett's outrage. The moderator tried to regain control, but the flood of words made it impossible. The tension grew heavier, every exchange louder than the last. Miller, refusing to yield, pushed harder. "Your so-called truth is nothing but spin. You want chaos, because without it, you're irrelevant. That's the difference. You thrive on outrage. I build real solutions." But Crockett's rebuttal sliced through the noise. "Solutions? You mean cages at the border? You mean propaganda dressed up as patriotism? Let's be clear, your legacy isn't solutions, it's suffering, and you can't shut me down no matter how many times you raise your voice. The words rang out with a force that silenced even the other panelists for a beat. The audience could sense it. The fight was no longer balanced. Crockett wasn't just countering Miller's lines, she was dismantling the foundation beneath them. Every time Miller tried to pivot, she cut him off with specifics. Every time he raised his volume, she raised the stakes. The argument was no longer about who spoke louder. It was about who could stand when the facts and the fury collided. And with each exchange, Miller's confidence cracked just a little more, his defenses tested against a force that refused to retreat. The turning point came suddenly, like a lightning strike. Miller, visibly frustrated, launched into a long tirade about loyalty, law, and order, his words spilling fast as if sheer speed could bury Crockett's momentum. "This nation doesn't need lectures from people like you," he thundered. "People who twist the facts, who undermine security, who would rather see America weakened than stand strong against chaos." The studio buzzed with tension, but Crockett waited. She let him burn through his lines until he paused for air, convinced he had regained control. And that's when she struck. Her voice cut in, crisp and unshakable. "Stephen, every time you speak about strength, what I hear is fear. You build walls because you're afraid of change. You silence voices because you're afraid of truth. And here's the final blow. America isn't afraid with you. It's afraid of you." The silence was instant, electric. The panel froze, the moderator speechless. The audience could almost feel the weight of her words hanging in the air, unanswerable and devastating. Miller's mouth opened as if to fire back, but nothing came. His usual arsenal of talking points suddenly felt brittle, useless. The moment stretched longer than anyone expected, and the cameras captured what Miller had spent years avoiding: stillness. Other panelists exchanged glances, some stunned, some unwilling to intervene. Even the host, trained to keep the conversation flowing, sat motionless, as though speaking would shatter the gravity of what had just unfolded. For a man who built his image on never being silenced, this was the unthinkable. Crockett had landed not just a counterpunch, but the kind of final strike that left no room for recovery. The words, "afraid of you," echoed far beyond the studio, carried instantly across social media, clipped and shared with captions that amplified their force. What had started as another debate had ended as a defining moment, a reversal so sharp that it left even Miller's staunchest defenders without lines to spin. It was the kind of silence that doesn't simply end a conversation. It rewrites the story. The aftermath felt almost unreal. For a few seconds, no one on the panel spoke. No one dared to break the silence that had descended after Crockett's final strike. The cameras caught every detail: the stunned expressions, the frozen host, the audience at home leaning closer to their screens, waiting to see if Miller could recover. But he didn't. He shifted in his chair, cleared his throat, forced a tight smile, and then let the silence speak for him. It was the silence of defeat, the silence of a man who realized that his usual arsenal had failed him. Crockett leaned back, not with arrogance, but with certainty. She didn't need to add another word. The damage was done, and everyone in the room knew it. Her last line was still echoing in the air, stronger than any closing statement she could deliver. The moderator finally stepped in, stumbling over words, trying to pivot to another topic, but the moment could not be undone. The panel was broken, speechless, and the show had lost control of its own narrative. What remained was not discussion, but a shared understanding that something irreversible had happened. For viewers across the nation, it wasn't just about Miller being silenced. It was about the symbolism of the exchange. A strategist who had thrived on dominance was suddenly stripped of his power by a single, unflinching voice. A rising lawmaker had not only held her ground, but forced the entire panel to confront what silence looks like when truth lands too hard to deny. Social media erupted instantly. Clips of the final blow spread like wildfire. Headlines began drafting themselves. Miller left speechless. Crockett's strike echoes across America. The moment became more than television. It became a cultural flashpoint. And as the night ended, one message remained clear. In politics, words may be weapons, but silence, when forced upon the powerful, can be the loudest sound of all.